Have you ever felt like no matter how much you give, it is never enough? That loving someone means losing a piece of yourself? Today, we're joined by someone who's walked that very path and emerged with clarity, strength, and an incredible message of hope. Diane Metcalf is here to help us understand narcissistic family dynamics and what it truly means to heal from emotional trauma. Welcome to Happiness on Tap, where we bring you inspiring stories and practical insights for a happier, more fulfilling life. Your go to podcast for uplifting conversations that stir the heart and ignite the spirit. I'm your host, Leann, and today we have a very special guest, Diane Metcalf. Diane is a writer, a speaker, an emotional wellness advocate who helps people recover from toxic relationships, particularly those rooted in narcissistic abuse. Her journey began with a painful realization of growing up with a narcissistic mother, followed by years of emotional turmoil in a toxic relationship. But instead of staying stuck, Diane turned her pain into purpose. Through her powerful Lemon Moms book series, insightful blog articles, and practical recovery tools, Diane has crafted a safe space for others to reclaim their voices and their lives. She is not only a survivor, she is a guide, offering heart-centered wisdom for anyone navigating the long road of healing. Today, we're diving deep into the signs of narcissistic abuse, the long-term impact on self-worth, and what it takes to rise and reclaim and rewrite your story. So get ready. This episode is going to be both validating and empowering. Let's welcome Diane to the show. Diane, it is so wonderful to have you here with us today.
Hi, Leann. Thank you. I am thrilled to be here.
I'm so happy that you're here and you're going to share your story and all of the things that you have learned to help our audience in those repeating patterns and how we can avoid those. So let's start with your story. What was the turning point that made you realize that you were living in a toxic dynamic?
Well, for me, I think, I think I might have discovered this a little bit later than a lot of people. I was about 12 when I guess, became aware of the fact that things were different in my home. And I can laugh about it now. I laugh a lot. I have a lot of joy in my life now. And that's what healing can do. So for the people that are watching and they're like, why isn't she angry? Why isn't she still resentful? Well, we'll get to that. But right now, I feel okay talking about all this. I can talk about this without being triggered. So this is a wonderful opportunity for me to share, and maybe my story can help other people. But I was about 12 when I realized, you know, my friends of the same age didn't quite have the same kind of interactions with their mom as I did. I started to really hone in on that and I started to observe people and their behaviors and their interactions, especially mothers and daughters and mothers in general with their children. And I saw that, their mothers were loving and kind and soft-spoken and nurturing and gave a lot of affection and hugs and really seemed to be cheerleaders for their children. I mean, they were lifting them up and being emotionally supportive, and they were kind and they smiled a lot. They seemed to enjoy being with their children and interacting with them. And that was not my experience at home. For me, my home environment was like living in a three-ring circus. It was chaotic all the time. And what was the right thing to do today, or even right in this minute, might be the wrong thing to do 5 minutes from now. Because my mom, she was not emotionally stable, to say the least. We we really, we in the family, and we as in me and other therapists and other people who have discussed this, there is a consensus that there was some undiagnosed mental illness there, most likely narcissism. Others have thrown the word borderline personality, but a narcissist is a borderline personality who needs to be admired. That's the only difference. And so that's where the narcissism comes in. Um, but we'll never know for sure because she never went to therapy. She never thought she had a problem. All her problems were because of everyone else, which is a typical narcissistic kind of a thing. So, yeah, I became aware of that at about 12. And because I was so hyper vigilant and always taking her emotional temperature and trying to fly under the radar and stay unnoticed so I could stay safe, um, I became very good at predicting behavior. And um, that led me, I think, into my interest in psychology. So it actually brought me to the place where I earned a degree in psychology. So in that regard, it was good. And I learned a lot. Um, but as an adult, I took myself to therapy eventually. And we're talking early 80s. So there was no computer, there was no internet, there were no cell phones, there was no social media or ways to dive deeper into the topic. And the topic of narcissism wasn't really discussed even in therapy then because it was thought to be extremely rare. And add to that was at a time when you did not say anything negative about your mother. Mothers were saints. All mothers were wonderful, nurturing, loving. You don't say disparaging things about your mother. So now, today, we are much more realistic and we realize not all mothers are kind and nurturing. And mothering itself is a learned behavior. So you've got to learn how to be a mother. You're not just born with that. So that's where it all began. I was about 12 when I started to notice. And then as an adult, I worked on things like self-esteem, self-confidence in my therapy sessions. So it wasn't really trauma-informed therapy. It wasn't about narcissism or healing codependent symptoms or behaviors or even CPTSD. So all of that came later.
Mhm. Yeah, I can certainly relate to pretty much your story.
Okay.
I think I was probably going into middle school, so right around 12,
Yeah,
when I had a different set of friends because I went from Catholic school to public school. And
same.
so all my Catholic school friends, you know, they lived in a different, we all lived in a different bubble where you definitely didn't talk outside of your house to anyone about what was going on within the walls.
Right.
Um, Middle school, I think much more of my friends all had very similar mothers. And so we talked to each other about what was going on in our homes to kind of support each other. And yeah, the living on eggshells, the anticipatory, uh, learning how to do things to keep them from reacting or acting. Um,
Yes.
those were all similar behaviors that I had growing up.
Yeah.
And but at least I did have my core group of friends that we all had messed up mothers. So we could support each other. And, we knew if we were spending the night at each other's homes, what to expect. Although many times my friends would say, I swear your mother has a camera in your room. And I'm just like, don't say that. I don't want to know if she does. But yeah, we all definitely had that growing up. But yeah, there was no therapy that really had a diagnosis or a way to help us get through it. So I
That's
didn't
right.
start going through any kind of therapy for my childhood until my late 40s.
Same. Yep, I would say, I think for me, it was like 42, 43, 44. I was still terrified of my mother at that point.
Mhm.
And once I started to, one of the first things I did was there were two things, and that I'm not even sure which came first. They were both, I was both, I was using both of them around the same time together. Number one, I learned to use my voice because I was not allowed to. You get it, right?
Yep, 100%.
You can't, you can't say, when you're a child at home, I'm hurt or I need this or no. Things like that would get me hit. My mom
Yep.
liked to hit.
My mom
She
liked
liked to hit in the face as well, and hit with objects.
Mhm.
So, everything that's classic child abuse today, back then, was like, well, you got to do what you got to do. It's your kid. You got to raise them the way you want
Yep.
to. And that was kind of more accepted. Um, so I started to use my voice and talk back to her. Here I am, 44, terrified to like talk back and give my mother my own opinion. But I thought, what's she going to do to me? Is she going to hit me? Because if she hits me, I'm an adult now. There are things I can do.
Yep.
And the other thing I started to do was set boundaries. One of the first boundaries I learned, and I recommend this for everybody, is learning how to say no. Just say no. It doesn't have to be mean. It's not mean, it's not selfish. Um, you can say anything you need to say if you choose the right words, and you can
Mhm.
certainly say no and enforce your boundaries with the right words. And you can rehearse that stuff ahead of time. You can have scripts.
Yeah, those
So,
are the two number one top things that I learned as well. But again, I didn't learn them until, yeah, mid 40s.
yeah, yeah.
Um, my husband, we grew up on the same block, but he had the nurturing, loving parents, never saw his parents fight, was never struck as a child.
Mhm.
So for me, just to share my childhood out of fear that if, I had to tell him, but at the same time, I worried that he may not want this relationship because I came with a whole lot of baggage.
I get it. I get
But
it.
he really supported in teaching me how to use my voice
Nice.
and boundaries, and to be able to have those boundaries without justification and without guilt.
Yes.
And so it was, probably a good 2 years of him working with me before I stopped apologizing for everything.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
If I realized that I hadn't filled the water pitcher, I would lead with, I'm sorry, and a justification. And he was
Yes.
like, no, we need to work on this because obviously my therapist was not working on these things with me. But he taught me how to have that voice. But I haven't had any contact with my mother in 27 years.
Okay. So you went no contact.
I went no contact.
Wow.
But
I respect that. I respect
I
that.
still had a lot of triggers for a lot of years, a
Yeah.
lot of fear.
Mhm.
Um, I didn't want to share my story because I feared she may find out. And
Mhm.
that came from years of being afraid. Like I think I mentioned to you when we first met, I couldn't write notes to my friends because she would search me in fear that I was going to share what was going on inside our home
Mhm.
with a friend who a friend's mom may see it or a teacher may see it or so I had all the extra, and I'm sure you did as well, these extra weird layers of fear.
Mhm.
And the voice thing, I remember like coming home from school and wanting to be like, hi mom, I'm home, and not realize that there may be another person in the house. Like she'd have her lady friends over for tea or whatever. And if they
Mhm.
were sitting at the table and I didn't see them and I walked into the room speaking, oh,
Mhm.
yeah, I was hit.
Oh, wow. That sounds so familiar. I was
Mhm.
often told children should be seen and not heard. And,
Absolutely.
the thing that you're saying that I can identify with is, it's all about their image. You know, narcissists need to have that positive false face that they put out there, and everything the children do have to support that fake self that they're putting out there. They're showing the world one thing, and we at home know there's a totally different face that other people don't get to see, and we get to see and deal with the real one. And
Mhm.
so, I'll give you an example. If we went to someone's home and they had a dish of candy on their coffee table, I was not allowed to take one. If they offered me a beverage or a snack, I was supposed to say no. I was never supposed to take anything, even if it was offered. I was supposed to stay quiet, sit with my hands in my lap, and just sit there, not fidget, not get up and run around, not do any of the normal childhood things. Um, I was supposed to be seen and not heard, but I was supposed to also make her look good and make her look like this excellent mother. And the best compliment she could ever receive from anyone was how well behaved I was. Just so well behaved, meaning that I just sat there and I was quiet and didn't ask for anything. And so that is the message throughout my childhood, that don't ask for anything. Don't say what you need or what you want. Just stay quiet, stay invisible. And that's the way we like it. And that's what we expect. And so it's really hard then to break out of that when suddenly one day you're an adult and you haven't learned any other way. And so you're afraid of everything and you stay quiet and you become this people pleaser. These are all codependent symptoms. And, I discovered for myself that, I feel like, and I know you are too, right? You are, and we are strong, independent, successful women. To be called codependent doesn't feel good. It feels like, oh, there's something wrong with me. Well, in my opinion, I developed those codependent dependent behaviors as a coping mechanism. We
Absolutely.
developed these to stay safe. So people pleasing, that was definitely a thing, because if I could anticipate my mother's needs, or I could feel something brewing in her mood where things were going to flip, I could get ahead of that, hopefully, and keep myself safe by placating her or doing something for her, or if worse came to worse, get out of the way. So, you know, that I think that's definitely how all the codependent symptoms for me began.
Mhm.
They were survival mechanisms to keep me safe. And I'm sure that's for you too.
Yeah, it sounds like we were two peas in a pod
Exactly. I
with
think
our
so.
crazy. But it came with, like you said, a lot of the healing to be able now to talk about it, to laugh about it, to realize who we've become because of it.
Yes.
But it's a lot of work and understanding. And you mentioned something in the very beginning where you said, parenting is a learned behavior.
Yeah.
And so for me, part of forgiveness, although I hate that
I get it. Yeah.
word, um, part of that for me was understanding that the way my mother was the same way that my grandmother was with her.
Yes, same here.
And so when I was a kid, during the summers, if I was being punished, she would send me to spend the summer with my grandmother in Colorado.
Oh boy.
One didn't speak a word of English. So it was hard enough. Like I couldn't anticipate her because I couldn't understand her. But I
Oh,
got
yeah.
to see
Wow.
her abuse on, because my mom was one of 13. So if any of
Mhm.
the other adult children would be visiting, or I got to watch her beat my grandfather.
Oof.
So for me, that part of forgiveness and understanding was knowing that my mother was the way she was because of the way she was raised. She didn't know
Yeah.
better.
Yes. Yeah.
And
That's
that was the
absolutely right.
only
Narcissists become
way,
narcissists as children.
that was the only way I
Yeah.
could come to terms and get out of the hate and the
Mhm.
anger and, just living in that darkness.
Mhm.
I was
Yeah.
like, okay, I can live with that thought.
Yeah. Yeah. It made you see your mom more as a human being who was kind of just, I hate the word victim, but she was a victim of her circumstances too.
Mhm.
And we could be victims we could, oh, poor me, I was raised by a narcissistic mom. And I want to be a survivor. I am a survivor. I am not in victim mode because I'm an adult now. And I may have all of that in my background and in my history, but it doesn't define who I am today. I get to do that. I get to rewrite that scenario. I get to do things that heal myself and take care of that wounded inner child. And I know that's such a big buzzword. And I used to think, oh my gosh, it's, sounds so woo woo, but no, there is something to that, like learning to reparent yourself and address that little child that really is still in there. There's parts of us that are still in there, still hurting,
Yeah.
still wanting a mommy who would hug me and nurture me and kiss me and tickle me and smile at me and want to be with me. I miss those things. I never got those things. I will never have those things because my
Nope.
mother has passed. But I can do those things for myself. And as weird as that sounds, it really works. It is a thing. And I highly recommend inner, child um, reparenting as a form of therapy.
Yeah, I do as well. I did learn not to try to do it on yourself alone, but it was a huge breakthrough experience that I had because I had been doing like daily meditation for long enough that I
Yeah.
thought I was able to handle an inner child meditation. And
Uh-huh.
uh, all I remember after it was over was being curled up on the floor in a ball, just
Hmm.
crying harder than I had ever cried in my life.
Okay. Yeah.
But I clearly remember the guided visualization that went with it and
Uh-huh.
sitting with my younger self and,
Yes. Yes.
giving her that love and care
Yes.
that she never received. And so yeah, it's tough, but it's healing.
Yeah. I mean, you were feeling for her at the same time that you were feeling for yourself. It's kind of mind blowing.
Yeah.
And it takes a while to, like you said, you do the visualizations. And what I do now is I visualize myself hugging myself as a child and sometimes sitting and just talking to myself and saying, 6-year-old Diane, you didn't deserve to get hit in the face because your mother thought you did something that you didn't do. You didn't deserve that. You didn't deserve to sit in your bedroom and wonder what it was that you did when there was nothing. Literally, there was nothing. She had misperceived something and lashed out. And later on, she tried to make amends for that, which was like one of the only times that I can remember her ever actually trying to make things right between us, especially as a child, But um, I'm just kinder to that part of myself now, that because we grow up wanting to be perfect, perfectionism comes from that too. It's, I think, just an offshoot of people pleasing. We need to be perfect because then we are lovable. We have to earn our love. I mean, that's a big one for me. Like I couldn't just accept love. If somebody liked me or wanted to be friends with me, I couldn't understand why. It's like, well, I didn't do anything to earn this. I need to be providing something, doing something. And that was my mindset for a long time. And so that was another thing I had to work on, was that I can be lovable just by being me. I don't have to do anything for you or give you something, So there were a lot of things to untangle, and that's healing. A lot of people have that, I think, a misperception that healing is linear. And you go from A to B to C, and then you reach this end and you're healed and you're done. And that's not at all how it works, right? I mean, you know that, I know that.
Yeah. So
So
just from, sharing our very similar stories, and we've talked about a lot of the early signs, are there other signs and patterns that you can share that people often miss in those type of relationships, whether it's as we move on and go into other relationships with a partner or even a friend or even a coworker?
yeah, the image thing, that is a big thing. Like their image is the most important thing. So you're going to be a satellite that revolves around them and what makes them happy and what makes them look good, and you are going to be a support person in their life, you're really not going to be anything more than that, even though they might love bomb you and they might make you feel really good at the beginning. You're really there just to prop them up and support them and make them look excellent, make them look like all the things that they really are not, but that they want to be. And so they employ other people, through relationships in their lives to do that for them. And we don't even know that, we don't realize we're employees basically meant to do this job for them. Um, so other things you can kind of look for, rages are a big thing. Like they'll lose their temper at seemingly small things. Like it could be like just a flip of a switch and you think, why are they how did that make them angry? It's because they take everything personally, very personally, things that are not at all personal, and it will flip that trigger in them, and they will react with a rage. It's like an adult temper tantrum. It's really bizarre to watch. It's not cute, it's not funny, it can be dangerous.
Mhm.
And they will lash out, they will say hurtful things. It's about winning. They don't care what they say or how much they hurt you. They will shred relationships with their words, and they don't care at the time because it's about winning, putting you in your place and hurting you. Um, let's see. And the rages are triggered by narcissistic injuries, which we could talk about too if you want to. There's just so many layers to this topic. They're also going to be manipulative and controlling. They want to know everything you're doing. They want to have control of who you talk to, what you say. Um, when you gave that example about your mom searching you and not wanting you to talk about anything inside the home, and she was, kind of worried that
Mhm.
you might, I mean, that's part of that manipulation and control. They will feel very comfortable looking through your phone, looking in your purse, listening to conversations. I had a partner that opened my mail and read my mail, as well as went into my purse and all my personal things. I couldn't have any privacy whatsoever, ever. Even in the restroom. I mean, there was just no privacy, and it was like living under a microscope. It was not healthy. So, you might have some of that, power struggles, and gaslighting. Gaslighting is also a really big one. And for those who don't understand what gaslighting is, it's basically when your senses are telling you, I saw this, I heard this, I know what I saw, I know what I heard, I know what I smelled or touched or tasted. And then the narcissist or the toxic person is telling you, no, you didn't. Here's what you saw. Here's what you heard. I never said that. I never did that. What my mother would say to me was, you dreamt it. I never did that. You imagined it. And what gaslighting does is it makes you doubt your perceptions. It makes you doubt your memory. You start having all kinds of doubts about, well, did I see that right? Did I hear that right? Did that even happen? And I learned how to gaslight myself. I got really good at self-gaslighting. So that's another thing you have to be aware of if it's happening and if you're doing it, and then you have to work on that. So there's multiple things that most of the time we're going to be working on simultaneously to heal from this kind of abuse. And the longer you're in this kind of situation, the more abuse you're subjected to and the more things that you'll have that you're going to need to heal.
I don't think I had any, I can't remember any particular gaslighting with my mom because for whatever reason, even though she tried to hide her behaviors when she was physically abusive,
Mhm.
there was no way of me hiding what she had done.
Mhm.
And it
Mhm.
wasn't until teachers or neighbors either witnessed it being done to me, being hit or whatever, or
Mhm.
I would go to school with bruises on my face, chunks of hair missing, and then they would ask, like, did this
Mhm.
happen to you at home? Who's doing this?
Okay.
But so she didn't tell me that I wasn't, that I was imagining it or
Yeah. Yeah, she
dreaming of
couldn't.
actually. No,
Mhm.
because I remember being a kid and this was, yeah, it was middle school. Middle school was such a pivotal change in life because then there was signs posted in the hallways that said, if you feel like you're being abused, here's this phone number that you could call. And she used
Oh,
to dare me to do it.
oh, wow. Wow.
You think you're going to report me? Go ahead, see what happens. They're not going to
Yeah.
believe you.
Interesting. Yeah, we
But that might have been a little bit of the gaslighting, but yeah, she used to like dare me and punk me to see
oh,
if I
wow.
would do things, or to see if I would speak back so that she'd have a reason to hit me.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds familiar too. Um, oh, you're crying, let me give you something to cry about. You're just a baby. You're
Same
you're
book,
too
my mom
sensitive.
and your mom.
Yeah. We weren't allowed to have feelings or feel our feelings because then we were
Mhm,
vulnerable and then we were mocked for having feelings or feeling things that they couldn't feel like that. I think that is something I forgot to mention. Like narcissists, they don't feel the same way we feel. They don't have empathy.
mhm,
Empathy is when you feel for somebody. You see somebody crying and it makes you cry too. It makes you feel sad. That's empathy. They
mhm.
don't have that.
No.
It's just something they're
Mm-mm.
lacking. And so they look at people feeling something and they don't get it. They're like, I they have no idea what's happening. And they don't like that they don't know what's happening. So they try to control it. And they can shame you for it and humiliate you for it, make you feel bad. And I learned to hide my feelings. And I think eventually I started numbing my feelings because
Yeah.
I didn't want to go through that shaming and that humiliating and the mocking, and just very hurtful stuff. And I look at that now, and it's still sometimes hard for me to believe that that was my childhood. Like, what mother would do that? These were all intentionally done.
Yes.
What mother would humiliate her child? What mother would strike her child and and tell her, her kid, you didn't? Here's an example. I came home to visit. I had already moved away. I was in my 20s. I came home to visit and I, let myself in. And my grandmother was living with her at the time. And my mom didn't know I had walked in. And I sat down in the kitchen and I'm just kind of waiting for her to come out. And she was in the bedroom taking care of my grandmother. And she was verbally abusing my grandmother very loudly. I mean, all kinds of swearing going on, cursing, yelling. And when my mother yelled, she would get beet red, her eyes would bulge out. She would bare her teeth, spit would fly. She was scary, and I remember that as a child. She came out of the bedroom looking like that, and she was winded, like huffing and puffing. She was just that worked up. And I said, "Are you okay? I mean, you're taking care of grandma. What's going on? Do you need help?" Because I was a social worker at the time, and I was always trying to hook her up with services that would help her,
Hmm.
like respite and Meals on Wheels and stuff like that. And she looked at me and she goes, you know, "I don't need help." And I said, "Well, you were calling her names and you were being pretty belligerent. And what do you mean? I never did that." "Well, Mom, I heard you say, quote, blah, blah, blah." "I didn't say that. You must have imagined it." And there I was, not 2 minutes beforehand. I was sitting there listening, witnessing this. She's going to tell me I imagined it. And that I think that really is when it clicked for me. I'm like, she did it again. And of course, I didn't know it was called gaslighting. Gaslighting wasn't a term.
No, it wasn't a term.
Um, so I just knew she was doing something and twisting and manipulating, but I didn't, without the word, without knowing what to call it, how do you talk about it? But I was like, that's it. She did it again. She's telling me that I'm not seeing things and hearing things the way I know that I am. And that's when I realized I think it's her. I think because I used to believe that, okay, there's something wrong with me.
Yeah.
I'd grown up with this message for my entire life, and I believed there was something wrong with me that I had to fix. And I was working really hard to fix, but there wasn't anything wrong with my perception or my memory, because she would tell me, "Well, I don't remember that. That no, you imagine that, or you dreamt that." I got so sick of hearing that. But when she did that day with my grandmother, I thought, okay, this is a thing. I don't know what it is, but it's something wrong with her. And now I'm aware of it. I can catch it when it happens, which meant that I didn't have to get caught up in the narrative that she was spinning. I could put up, like a boundary about that and say, I can reject that. I can reject the fact that she's telling me I imagine this. I can stay with myself in the present, stay grounded, and say, yes, I did see that. Yes, I did hear that. And I can honor myself instead of going along with her imaginings and fantasies. And that was a big healing point for me.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Wow. I think I read, yeah. Yeah, the gaslighting is just not something I really remember her doing with us as kids.
I'm glad you weren't. It did a lot of harm for me in the sense of Um, I mean, it really messed me up. I think that it actually made me mentally ill for a long time in the sense of not being able to trust my perception. It got to the point where I would rely on her to tell me what was real and what wasn't real, in my later teens, and that's not a good thing. So once I left home and I was able to now see it from a different perspective and catch it when it was happening.
Yeah.
That was healing for me, and that was the beginning, I think, of setting some very simple boundaries. Although I wouldn't have had the word for that, I wouldn't have even been able to tell you, oh, I set a boundary. I
Yeah.
just knew that I was somehow putting distance and doing things that kept myself safe from her, and I think a little bit of physical distance definitely went a long way.
It did for me.
Yes. Yes. I could see that. Yes.
And it sounds like we both repeated those patterns with romantic relationships.
Yeah.
Um, why do you think that we sometimes repeat those patterns as adults? Is it that same thing? It's like parenting and it's a learned behavior. It's a learned behavior.
I think for me, yes, I did repeat. I basically chose my mother a couple of times in male form. Um, and I think it's because, and there was no awareness around that. First off, it's like I get involved in the relationship, right? Meet somebody, and it would feel really familiar, just familiarity. And I think that's the key. It was like, oh, some part of me in my subconscious, because there is a subconscious, and it's running the show for a lot of our daytime life. It's always running the show in the background. We're not aware of it. But that part of me, I believe, said, oh, this feels familiar. I know what to do in this kind of relationship, and start caretaking, start, whipping out all those codependent behaviors because they worked in that one relationship. They're going to work in this one. And so, yeah, I think it was just the familiarity, and we had been groomed to be caretakers and people pleasers, and we had all of our codependent tools, and we certainly knew how to use them. So, yeah, it felt very familiar, but also it was equally as disappointing and hurtful of a relationship, a very one-sided relationship. They're always going to be one-sided.
Yeah.
You're going to be the giver, they're going to be the taker, and you're going to earn their love, or you think you are, but you're going to do everything you can to earn it, and you're going to get crumbs. And so you're never going to feel loved, you're never going to feel seen, heard, accepted. So it's always going to be a very hurtful, disappointing relationship. I call those non-nurturing relationships. And you don't have to be with a narcissist to be in one of those.
Man, you nailed it. You nailed it. I don't even think I realized until, and I was in a 20-year relationship, 20-year marriage that was basically a male form of my mother. And I didn't even realize that it was that familiarity of uh, the abuse, the rage, uh, the allegations. I always knew one thing I think I knew from birth was that I was raised to be a wife and a mother, to be seen and not heard. You can even see that on my website. Like, this is who I am, because that's exactly how I was raised. And I repeated all those same patterns, the walking on eggshells, the trying to anticipate his every need,
Yeah.
always feeling like I was not enough. If I do anything, he's going to leave me. And we actually divorced at one point because he had an affair. And I still took him back because I didn't think that I could do any better.
Yeah.
Like I had zero self worth.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, yeah, you really nailed it in that, the part of what makes us repeat those behaviors is
Mhm.
it's what we know.
Yeah, and when things go wrong, we take responsibility. So it's divorce is just as much of an untangling, as healing from narcissistic abuse. There's just layers and layers that you have to untangle, and it's like it feels overwhelming and like you're never going to be able to do it. Thing is, you have to start at some point. So,
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely wasn't an easy process
no.
because we had separated for a good portion while we were going through the divorce because we had to file bankruptcy. We lost our house. Um, we physically separated, but I was still living in the house. And he would think he could just show up whenever he
Oh.
wanted to. He had a
Hmm.
key, and it didn't matter that we were separated. And,
Yeah.
all his stuff was still there. I mean, big stuff, because of course, 20 years of accumulation.
Hmm.
So he just thought he could show up anytime he wanted until one time it became so violent that the next day I called my best friend and said, I need help. I got to get out. And she showed up within like 2 hours with a moving truck.
Wow.
And I
Good friend.
loaded it up and left and said, I'm done. Like I had to do, it was that I had to find a place where I felt safe because
Hmm.
my last interaction with him prior to some ugly ones while going through the divorce in front
Hmm.
of judges was him chasing me through the front yard of our home with a sledgehammer.
Wow.
And, I thought, well, I survived my mom. I can survive him
Right.
too. And
Yeah.
here's one of those funny, I think it's funny now. It's definitely not funny at all. um, I had an older brother. He was 5 years older. And we were both adopted from different families. So he was tall. He was 6'4". My mom was probably 5'1", 5'2", which is about my height. But she got to a point where she couldn't abuse my brother because he was so much bigger than she was. So her
Hmm.
favorite line to him was, you have to sleep sometime. I'll get you when you sleep.
Wow. So threats.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Because she knew she couldn't like reach up and hit him. She could throw things at him,
Hmm.
but she couldn't physically like reach up to hit him in the face because he could pull
Hmm.
back.
Hmm.
But
Yeah,
yeah, she used to
threats. Yeah.
threaten him with, I'll get you when you sleep. So I remember so many nights where we just didn't sleep.
Yeah, I can see why. I I'm with you there too. I had a lot of threats. She would threaten bodily harm. I'll break your fingers. I will kill you. Literally death threats. I will bring you to the orphanage because we didn't live too far from a very well-known orphanage at the time. Um, just again, like what mother does this? Like not a mentally healthy mother. No, no. So, and as children, we don't know that, right? We just think,
No.
oh, I've got to be a good little girl. I've got to do better. I've got to, or we start the monitoring and the emotional temperature taking so we can stay out of the way,
Yeah.
and we minimize ourselves. We lose our own identity because we're so focused on them, and it's all so harmful. It's all so harmful. And so many people have been raised like this, and they're walking around today, 40, 50, 60 years old, and they don't realize, they seriously don't realize that there are things that need to be healed. They maybe never went within themselves to look at the things that need to be healed and untangled. And it probably, for many, never crossed their mind because they just learned how to deal with it and they just kept moving on
Mhm.
and they accepted it for what it is, abuse, although they may not call it abuse. I've heard lots of people say, "Oh, that's just the way she is. Oh, she's just got a short temper." Or, "Oh, we just stay away from her when she gets in one of her moods." And it's like, don't do that. Call it what it is. That's, I think, one of the biggest, well, one of the first things you need to do besides setting boundaries and learning to say no and use your voice. The first thing is to get real with yourself and
Mhm.
call it what it is. It's emotional abuse, sometimes physical abuse.
Yeah.
It is abuse. And once you can wrap your head around that and you can be real and say, I'm not going to gaslight myself anymore and call this other things or make excuses for him or her. It is abuse. Okay, it's abuse. So now what do we do? Now we have to start doing things. Um, and I think that's where the magic is when you can call it what it is and then start dealing with it.
Yeah. For me, I think the power that I grew into was not only that I could name it for myself and stop gaslighting myself,
Yes.
was that when I had relatives who would tell me, "Oh, you just need to get over this. You need to forgive your mother," and
Mhm.
and be like, "No,
No, you
like
don't.
you seriously, you know what happened to me as a child. You witnessed it,
Yes.
and you're telling
Yes.
me that I need to just get over myself? Like, no,
Yeah.
this is what she did." And so eventually
We,
that was like that magic moment where I learned how to have my own voice
there you go.
and I learned how to set boundaries. Like at that point, I was done with those relatives. Like
Yes.
I don't want to see you another day and hear this another day of you
Yeah. No.
defending her behavior and telling me I just need to get over myself. I am an adult.
Yeah. Yeah.
And by
Yeah.
that
That's
point, yeah, I was adult. I had 2 kids. I was in my
yeah.
30s and I was like,
This is like so typical coming from people who don't understand. Even though they saw what was happening, they did not understand what it was and what it was doing to you. And because of that ignorance, they re-traumatized you. I mean, they invalidated you by telling you, get over it and move on and forgive. Forgiveness is a personal choice. And some choose to forgive, some don't. I had a long, well, it took me a long time to forgive. I actually didn't want to because I felt like I knew it was a choice. And I felt like if I forgive, that means that I can't hold on to this anymore. And I wanted to hold on to it and be angry about it and keep looking at it and like how much she wronged me. And then I thought, I'm wasting a lot of time on this and it's not good for me to continually trigger myself and get myself worked up and angry. I I knew that I needed to let it go. I didn't know how to let it go. Once I figured that out, and the forgiveness thing wasn't even like a religious thing. It was just
yeah,
more of an agreement with myself that I'm not going to hold her accountable anymore. I'm not going to expect the apology anymore. I'm just going to accept that she is who she is. She's never going to apologize. She's never going to admit doing anything wrong or hurtful. And to ask her to do that was just going to continually ask to be hurt and
mhm,
invalidated. And so it took a long time and I couldn't even tell you exactly what I did, but it was a process. And eventually I learned to just let that go and to say, I can forgive you. In other words, for me, it was about I can let the anger go. I'm not going to hold you accountable anymore. I believe in karma. I believe in destiny. I believe that I don't have to punish her because she will get what she deserves, right? It will all come together in the end. She's going to get what she deserves. And she's no longer with us. I think maybe in watching her in her older age, maybe karma did catch up with her. There were a few things that I think, okay, maybe this is it. But I didn't feel the need anymore to be in control of, trying to punish her or oversee the that justice was done. I just let that idea go. And to me, that was the form of forgiveness that I could
Yep.
give her.
Yep. Let go is powerful. I think I mentioned about my going to a hypnotherapist for letting go.
Yeah. Yes.
What are some of the other misunderstood aspects of recovery?
Okay, we talked earlier about how it isn't linear and it doesn't happen on a timeline. And I'm saying that again because there is the misunderstanding that if I enroll in this healing course, it's going to be 6 weeks. I'll be done. I'll be healed. I'll be all better. And it's like, no, it's not linear. It's you actually have to go through the grief process. And there are several stages of grief. And what you're grieving isn't so much what you had. You are grieving what you didn't have and what you wanted and what you know you will never have. That mother-daughter relationship or that mother or husband-wife relationship. You're grieving the relationship you didn't have. So there's that process. There's several stages of that. But as I mentioned, it's untangling. There's a lot of layers. So like there's going to be some trauma bonding there, which I don't want to get too deep into the terminology, but trauma bonds are when you form an attachment to your abuser. And it happens organically. It's not something we intend to happen. So it's like, when you play bingo and sometimes you win and sometimes you don't. Well, with an abuser, sometimes they're kind, or sometimes they're just not as nasty or hurtful as they could be. And so because it's on again, off again, and you never know what's going to happen, that's called reinforcement. It's intermittent reinforcement. And so we take those good things and we learn to interpret that as love. Oh, she didn't hit me this time. And you feel grateful and it's twisted, okay, but that sort of becomes how we feel about love. Um, when there's an absence of the abuse. For us, that is living in that way, in those parameters, that's a form of love, that's a trauma bond. And so we have to break those bonds and learn about real love and what real attachment is, and um, how healthy relationships work and how healthy people show love. And you don't have to earn it and things like that. Um, so we also end up dealing with cognitive dissonance, which goes along with the gaslighting, right? It's like, I know I saw this, but I'm being told I really saw that. That creates a confusion in your mind where you don't know what to believe, right? And so, in order to be mentally healthy, we have to have a consistency in our life. We have to be able to trust ourselves, trust our perceptions. And when you're living in an atmosphere like that, where, somebody's telling you the sky is red and you're going, no, I think it's blue, but you'll get hit if you disagree. Like that's cognitive dissonance. So it's like, you never know what's what. And so there's that layer that you have to take out and examine and heal and learn about and recognize it when it's happening. And all of this, I'm saying all of this with the sense of if you're still in this relationship with this person, you're recognizing all these things that they're doing. You can go no contact, and that can be very healthy for people. For me, I don't know, I couldn't do no contact, but I did leave the state and I did move somewhere else. And for me, that was almost no contact, but we did have very limited contact, my mother and I, over the phone. So that is how I dealt with it. Um, let's see. Codependency has been called, and because we have those codependent symptoms, there's a researcher who calls it a disease of the lost self. And I'm not sure about the disease part, but I do identify with and agree with
Yeah.
it
Of
is
the
it is
lost self.
it is a loss of self. So there's that layer where you have to now either discover who you are or create who you are. I think it's a little bit of both, but you have to find yourself in that mess. Um, so what else? You have to heal all of the results that happen from gaslighting, and those are the symptoms of CPTSD. So there's PTSD, post-traumatic post-traumatic stress disorder. And then C, the CPTSD. C means complex. And the difference there is that if you're repeatedly exposed to traumatic things, that's what makes it complex. So it's even more tangled and messy that you have to pull apart. So you have to start looking at all those symptoms that you have of CPTSD. And we won't even go into that here because there's so much to
Yeah, that's a
talk about.
whole nother episode for us.
Yeah, and then there's trust. I'll just end there with trust. Like you have to learn to not only learn to trust yourself again, trust your memory and your mind, trust your senses, your eyes, your ears, you have to learn to trust other people as well. I mean, that's huge.
Yeah,
You've got all this other stuff I just mentioned, but then you have to also do that. And it's like it takes time and it isn't something that's straightforward. You work on things as they come up. It kind of happens organically once you start. Like for me, and I think for you, you mentioned boundaries and using your voice. Those were the two starting points for me. And they organically progressed into learning other tools, seeing therapists for one thing or another, learning something else and working on that alone. We can make a lot of progress in a therapist office, but most of the real healing, most of the work happens in daily life
yeah,
when we're not sitting there for that 60 minutes.
yeah,
So it's not you go once a week in 60 minutes and then you get healed. This is something you work on daily and you do it with mindfulness and awareness, and you make time for it because you believe you are important enough and that you matter, and that this work is something you need to do for yourself, for your well-being.
yeah.
Yeah.
I know you're still doing it every day, and I'm still doing it every day.
Yes,
It seems
yes.
like time just really isn't real at this point because when I first had PTSD so severe that I shut down, had to figure out all those things. Who am
Yep.
I? Learn how to trust, learn how to have a voice, learn how to set boundaries, all of those things. It's been 5 years and I'm still, but now I'm hungry for the information. Like
Yes,
I want to
yes.
know more and more about it. And that's what draws me to invite people like you onto my podcast is to keep doing those deeper layers,
Mhm.
not to trudge up the trauma, but what tools, what modalities, and how we've grown as a person and how we've changed.
Yeah.
And my favorite part of the whole 5 years is the I get to, and you said that earlier, I get to
Yes.
choose who I am.
Yes. Yes.
And to now have a partner who I fully trust, who accepts me for all of my parts, who helps me through my healing, who, I mean, I could go on for hours about my husband, just having somebody that sees me that,
Mhm.
could never imagine what I've been through. And even little things like
Yep.
we'll start watching something on TV and he'll feel me tense and he'll be like, okay, do we need to shut this off? And I'm
Oh,
like,
wow.
I'm okay.
Beautiful.
Like
Yeah.
the triggers aren't the same. My mind goes to a different place of growth.
Mhm.
And I know that I'm in my safe space with him.
Yes, yes, you have found a safe space.
I have found a safe space. I want to talk about your books. Like
Okay.
I haven't gotten to read any of them. I definitely want to. Um, I know your books have touched so many lives. So please kind of give us an overview of your books. What inspired the title of your Lemon Moms book series?
Okay.
And what message do you hope your readers walk away with when they've read your books?
Okay. Um, I'll make it a short story because it could be a long story, but in 2018, um, I was sitting on my patio and doing gratitude exercises, which was one of the things I learned how to do after I learned how to do meditation and like just bringing more peace into
Mhm.
my life and starting my day with intention. And so I'm doing my gratitude list. And one of the things that I'm always grateful for was, well, therapy, authors who wrote books that I read, researchers who contributed to my understanding. I am grateful for all of those things because they all combined in a way to heal and continue healing. And I continue to find new people that help on that journey. And
Mhm.
so I'm going over this, and I don't know, I got this little nudge. I call them nudges when I have some kind of like little idea. And sometimes I push them away, but I got this little nudge that said, you should write down what you've learned. I'm like, no, shut that voice right down. No, I'm not going to write anything down. That would be crazy. I mean, put myself out there, be that vulnerable? No. Open myself up for judgment and criticism? No. But it kept coming back. You should write some of this down, even if it helps just one person, maybe telling your story and just maybe it would help somebody and maybe it would be like some of the final healing for you too. And I thought about that and I thought, again, no. Anyway, long story short, I thought, okay, I don't know how to write a book. I don't know what I'm doing. But I just started like jotting things down. It was almost like journaling at first, and then it started to grow and grow. And then I thought, well, if I am teaching, I kind of thought of it as teaching, like not just sharing my story, but also teaching somebody about those topics, all the things I didn't know at the time. And so that became the outline of the book. And that's how I wrote the book. And the title, Lemon Moms, it became a series. So there's three of them in the Lemon Moms series. The title came from, it's a nod to the lemon laws that all states have to protect us when we buy a car that doesn't work and we
Oh,
call the car a lemon. Just you keep taking it to the dealership or whatever, and they keep fixing it, but yet the problem is never fixed. And that's a lemon. And that means the manufacturer has to refund your money or give you a different car. So, I used to think I got a lemon mom. My mom's a lemon, so that was kind of a humorous way of
oh.
dealing with it. I never said she's an evil, blah, 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 so and so. In my head, I did, but publicly, I would just say, my mom's not like your mom. She's kind of a lemon. So people would get it. They would understand, all right, so there's stuff she doesn't want to talk about, but her mom is not, a nice mom. So the book then became, I wrote a companion workbook to go with it because at the end of every chapter, I asked some pointed questions and I encourage people to go deep with a journal, answer those questions. They never have to share them with anybody. It's just for them. And so I expanded on those end of chapter questions in a workbook. So that's the second book. And then the third book in the Lemon Mom series is a book of affirmations. It's like I wrote like 200 different affirmations, and they're all regarding the different things that we are healing from. So there's a chapter on affirmations to heal from gaslighting, affirmations to heal symptoms of CPTSD, affirmations, to deal with betrayal and being lied to, stuff like that. So they're very specific for narcissistic abuse. And I think they would probably also carry over to any kind of toxic relationship abuse. And so that's that series. And then I wrote another little workbook called I Am, um, a journey to finding your authentic self. And that's a workbook where again, there's a lot of questions and things to answer. And it kind of helps you drill down to who do you want to be? Because we do have to find ourselves, but there may not be a lot to find because we lost ourselves as children. We lost ourselves as children. So now we're not so much finding, we're finding some of those parts, but we're creating the adults we want to be, and we're creating the life that we want. So this book kind of helps with that. And then the recent book is called Red Flags, Icks, Personality Quirks, or Warning Signs, How to Know the Difference. And that one is really taking off right now, and it's all the things I wish I knew back in the day when I was dating. I've had people tell me they wish they had it back when they were dating. They buy it for their kids who are dating, like teenagers and or going off to college. So the red flags book is all about relationship red flags and what to look for and what to do with the information once you see it in a person and what it could mean and what it could mean for you and your relationship. So yeah, those are the five right now. No
Wow.
plans for another one yet, but you never know. When
Wow.
I get
Wow.
inspired, I'll write.
Absolutely love the title and the story behind the title. That is a
Thank you.
good, almost a positive on, like you said, not saying those feelings that we have inside. Although I was the
Yeah.
opposite. I out loud would say, "Oh no, she's the spawn of Satan."
Well, yeah.
I never,
I would
um,
say that with to certain people, but
I never
not
turned
publicly.
down a volume on
Yeah.
who she was because she did that enough for
Okay.
herself. But
Right.
I
Yeah.
like the Lemon Bombs. I mean, that is just absolutely a great title, a way to say, yeah, my mom was definitely different than yours. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
I the work, all of it just sounds great. All things I wish I had had, and I think that's where we become who we are in, and we are in the stage that we're at now. Is that we want to be able to share those stories, those red
Yep.
flags, those this is what happened to me, so that hopefully people don't repeat our patterns or repeat their own patterns or feel alone.
Yep.
They can look through those and go, oh, okay, I thought this was just me. I thought I was the only one that
Right.
had the crazy mom, or,
Right. Yes. Yeah,
you
I
know,
get people that write to me and say, "Thank you for writing this. I thought I was alone." And I'm like, "You are not alone." I say that a lot. You are not alone. You would be surprised how many people have had this kind of stuff in their background.
mhm.
Yeah.
I think your next step should be to write the book about how to write a book, because that's the one I also need.
Yeah, I ended up taking some classes for sure because I didn't know what I was doing. But yeah, yeah. If you're gonna write a book, yeah, definitely
Yeah.
just bounce it off me, and I'll give you some pointers if you want.
I have a drawer in my office that's full of and I didn't do journaling. It was the same thing. I couldn't write notes. I couldn't put pen to paper because I was afraid she'd see it. So it took me
Yeah.
until my adult life, until I actually went through all of this and was doing the healing.
Yes.
And
Like,
at first it was, I had to do it on a laptop because I
mhm,
could not physically put pen to paper. But what
mhm.
I could do, because of my background in accounting and legal, was I could keep a calendar.
Okay.
So as I was doing a certain meditation or a visualization or working with my therapist or working with my sound healer, those would be what would fill the box,
Mm,
on my calendar, the wins, from those
yeah.
experiences.
I love that.
And so now when I first started writing, I think I have the start of, I don't know, 4 books.
Mhm.
Um, I will take those calendars out and I can see each step in my healing
Oh, wow. Look at
just by,
that.
flipping the page and what did I do that day? What meditation did I do? What was it titled? And how did it impact me? And how did I grow from it?
Wow.
Um,
That's amazing.
so when I start writing,
Yeah.
where I go to, I bring those out and then I try to figure out, like, I don't think I have the path to put it into a book, like into chapters or, um, but I'm always looking to learn. So I'll look at, like you said, like other authors.
Yeah.
In fact, I started doing that when, one was, my one favorite is Brene Brown,
Oh, I love her.
and I own all of her books. My newest one that I've started buying her books is Mel Robbins. And so
Okay.
she
Yeah.
just came out with the Let Them theory.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
I will look at it and compare, like, how did they organize these thoughts
Mhm. Mhm.
into, like you said, teaching tools.
Yeah. Yes.
And I think Mel did it very differently from Brene. Brene was more of the researcher side.
Yes.
But I am thankful every day to Brene, because when I was in crisis and I had brain fog and memory loss and couldn't use my voice because I didn't know how to communicate what my body was experiencing,
Yes.
her book, Atlas of the Heart, broke it down into an A to Z, basically, of
Yeah.
emotions and feelings. And so I could read and be like, oh, that's what anguish is, in words that I could understand, relate
Yes.
to, and then
Uh-huh.
communicate, whether it was to my therapist or my husband or a friend. I now had like an encyclopedia of emotions
Yes. I love
and
it.
feelings that my body was learning. Like, it felt like it was learning for the first time, because I had spent a lifetime just shoving them down and not asking them what they were.
Yeah, you were learning them for the first time.
I
It's
was. I,
amazing. Yeah.
I literally felt like a child learning how to live again. And I did that
Yeah.
again.
And you were learning a whole new language.
Mhm. I did that again when
Yeah.
I enrolled in school to become a certified health and life coach, because I started with the fear of the brain fog and the memory loss. And how am I going to remember all of this information and
Right.
use it to help somebody
Yeah.
else?
Yes.
But
Yes.
then I thought, okay, well, if this brain fog and memory loss is my new normal, my alternative is to build a new one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, how am I going to do that? I'm going to do that by learning. I'm going to do that by writing notes. I'm going to,
Yeah.
so each step in that growth for me was
Yes.
was a learning experience. But it wasn't learning in things that were completely new to me, but
Mhm.
it was feeling like a baby. Like,
Yeah.
now I know what this means. Like, really,
Mhm.
people knew this? Nobody
Mhm.
told me. That's how I felt. Like, why
Yeah.
didn't anybody ever tell me about
Yeah.
taking care
Yeah.
of yourself?
I know. Same. It's like we're supposed to do that? I didn't know. I thought I was supposed to put myself last or maybe never. That's what was expected, right?
Isn't that crazy? And we should not be finding this out at 50. So we got to keep doing what we're doing
Yes.
to get this message out and into hands of a much younger audience. Like you said, people buying your books and sharing them with their kids who are starting to date, teenagers, or their
Yeah.
child when they go off to college,
Yes.
male or
Yes. Yes.
female.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
we never had a book. Nobody gave us a book.
No, no, nobody told me any of that either. It was something we both had to figure out ourselves. And maybe that's why I'm the age that I am. And it feels like it's taken me forever to get to this point. But, like you said, like if they start earlier, younger, they won't be where I am now going, okay, I think I've finally made a lot of progress. I would love people to make progress back before they're even 40, which is when I kind of started really
Mhm.
making
Mine was
progress in
40s.
yeah, yeah,
So I think what you have done, what you have put together, is something, like you said, people just let you know, like, I wish I had this then. I
yeah,
had an
yeah.
Encyclopedia Britannica set growing up. That's all I had.
Yes,
That was
yes, same. Or the library. I remember, having to pencil it in on my calendar to make a special trip to the library and hope that they had the book that I wanted or get on a wait list for it. I mean, it was just interesting times, wasn't it?
And so now we are
Things
so
were so
blessed.
different.
We're so blessed with advances in technology I
Yes.
never would have been a millionaire, thought I'd have a podcast, and have the technology to do that, have unlimited information at our fingertips. So if we can
Mhm.
take those two things together and put them in the hands of everyone, at least make it available.
Yeah. It's
That
there
is,
if you want it.
yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. Let's talk about your online resource
Okay.
toolbox. So tell us about it and how listeners can use it to support their recovery.
Okay. So the toolbox is my blog. It's kind of my baby. And I'll give you the URL. It's toolbox.dianemetcalf.com. So Diane Metcalf is also a website, and that's mainly where I post books or anything that I'm working on. It's just I have a lot of free resources there as well on dianemetcalf.com. And then there is a link to the toolbox there, or you could just get on the toolbox by itself. But that is where I write articles about recovering and moving forward from. It started out with being about maternal narcissism because that's what I knew. But it has grown into basically recovery from any kind of toxic or non-nurturing, non-supportive relationship. And so it's grown from that first endeavor to share and disseminate, information as I get a hold of it, and also based on things I've learned in my own journey. So, if you don't want to get on the toolbox and look at what's going on there, you can sign up and get the article sent to you twice a month. I don't like to overwhelm people with a lot of information, so I send out, it's like a newsletter, but it's really an email. And I call it the toolbox because the tools that I give with every article are coping mechanisms. So it's like I like to equate it with the toolbox. We have this box of tools, and, for different things going on in our lives, we can pick a tool and we can use that tool to deal with what's going on, because a lot of us have developed tools that are not good. Like, I don't know. For me, eating was one of them. I was a real, bad binge eater. I developed bulimia, and that was a coping mechanism for me. So I had to learn new and better, healthier coping mechanisms. So this is what I share in the toolbox. And, every other Friday, you get an article, and that way it keeps, at least for me, it keeps your inbox kind of peaceful. I'm not one to keep, sending things. And you can unsubscribe at any time really easy with one click. So there's that. And so I really enjoy writing. I usually put a new article out at the beginning of every month, but I started it in 2019, 2020, somewhere in there. So there's kind of a treasure trove now. There's several years worth of good stuff. So you might want to check it out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's wonderful. And for me, I mean, having multiple tools is exactly what we all need. Not one tool is going to fix two people. You can't show up with just a screwdriver and expect to build a house. So, you
Yes.
have to have all these tools. And the more tools you have at your disposal, then you can go to different tools for different situations that you're in,
Yep.
whether it's a panic attack, anxiety, depression. What tools do you have in your toolbox to help you get out from under an immediate trauma trigger, to get out from under an anxiety attack? Like, I never had any, we just didn't. There wasn't any tools. It was, here's
Hmm.
a pill that you can take. And I only had panic attacks when I went through my divorce,
Oh boy. Yeah.
um, the first time.
Yeah.
When he had his affair, I had really extreme panic attacks.
I'm
And I
sure.
didn't know what those were. And I had two little kids at home that they didn't know what I was going through. But I had a pill bottle with these little black and white tiny capsules that were supposed to make it go away. So basically, I
Okay.
had a large band aid that
Yeah.
could eventually calm me down enough that I could still function and make breakfast and take my kids to school. But I would have much rather had healthy tools.
Yeah, wouldn't it have been nice if you
My
learned some breathing exercises or, something simple like that that you could just use in the moment? Yeah. Yeah, I've got some tools like that. There's one article, there's probably more than one now, but setting boundaries, how to talk to your narcissistic mother. I've actually thought about making that into maybe a short book because people seem to really like that. I get a lot of mail from, hey, thank you for helping me just set the parameters around how to have a conversation because you have to do that, right? Because it's not going to flow the way you want. So you've actually got to do some preemptive work if you're going to have a conversation with your narcissistic mom. And it's a shame that we have to do that, but we do. And I've been thinking about maybe writing some scripts, just some ready-made scripts for how to handle certain situations or how to respond to certain things. So I don't know. I'm toying with that.
Yeah, I
We'll
think they'd be very, very helpful.
Thanks.
So for somebody who's listening right now, who feels stuck in a toxic relationship, what is one step that you would suggest that somebody could take towards healing or towards leaving or towards understanding?
Okay. The first step, I'm going to say it again, is call it what it is. No more gaslighting yourself, no more denying. If you're in a hurtful, one-sided relationship and it's just not working for you emotionally, if you are being verbally abused, emotionally abused, physically abused, it's time to get real and call it what it is and start taking the steps. If you're being physically abused, there are other steps. The steps you will take will be different than if you're being emotionally abused. I do have a free resource. I'll tell you about that one right now. It's a safety checklist, safety planning, because I was in an abusive relationship as well, and that's where this little checklist comes from. But it's you can find it at safety, SAFETY .dianemetcalf.com, and it's a free download PDF, and it will give you some first steps to do if you are wanting to make some changes in your relationship if you're being physically abused. Um, Eventually, you're going to want to get out, but it's not realistic to just run
Yeah.
out the door, especially if you have children. So there has to be a planning process. And a lot of women do leave and then come back and then leave again and come back. And that is very normal. Most people don't understand that that's normal. It has to happen that way until she is ready to make that final break. So it might take a few tries. Um, so what else? Creating that exit strategy, setting the boundaries, learning the very first one, just learn to say no. And it doesn't have to be, no, I'm not doing that. It can be very kind. No, I'm sorry, I can't do that for you right now, but maybe next time. No, that's not something I can do right now. But let me know when you want to maybe try that again. I mean, there are ways to soften it where you don't have to lie and you don't have to be mean.
Mhm.
And I know it feels selfish a lot of times to say no, but I can tell you from from my experience, it gets easier as you continue to do it. And you do it to protect your peace. You do it to protect your mental health and well-being. There are things that our spirit is telling us, no, don't do that. They want you to do that. They expect you to do that. Don't do that. But you just don't know how to say no. So it does come with practice. I would say start there.
Yeah, it does come with practice and it does get easier.
Yes, it does.
You learn, yeah, different ways to say it. But I think,
Mhm.
like I said, working with my husband on not starting everything with an I'm sorry,
Yes. Yes.
um, and just being able to say, thank you for the invitation, but I am unavailable.
Yes, perfect. You don't have to explain.
Yep.
It's
Don't
it's just one
just
one
you
sentence.
don't have to. Yep. And so yeah, it it has taken me a couple of years to really get better at it and get better at it without feeling guilty, uh,
Yes.
because that's part of that growing up in a narcissistic family. And,
Yes, it is.
because we feel like we're not doing what we're supposed to do, please everyone, be there for
Yes.
everyone, take care of everyone.
Yep. Yep. That's kind of our job. We are overly responsible and we take on responsibilities that do not belong to us. So we have to let the people that they belong to deal with them. It's like, wait, this isn't my responsibility. That's really yours. Here you go. This is your responsibility. Do it. Do your job. And that's hard. That's hard to do at first.
Yeah.
And it comes with practice, but yeah, you can get there for
Yeah,
sure.
I
So
recently
there's
wrote a
hope.
blog on that specific topic, and I think I titled it "You Are Not Responsible for dot dot dot," and being
Yeah.
able to identify what is not your responsibility, identify where the areas where you have enabled people by not
Mhm.
making them responsible.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's a big, again, here 5 years in, and I'm still learning. Still learning.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, it's never going to end.
yeah. I'll get you two more questions. One,
Okay.
you said you're living in joy. What does happiness look like for you right now after everything you have lived through and overcome?
It's interesting because today I'm the oldest I will ever be. For today, right? There is a saying that's like, today you're the oldest you'll ever be, and the youngest, no, to, and the youngest you'll ever be, or something like that, all on the same day. I screwed that up. Sorry, I don't really know.
That's okay.
Maybe you could cut that out. Uh, but um, so for me, joy is a big part of my life because first of all, I don't let things get to me anymore. I've learned what a lot of my triggers are. I've learned not to take things personally. I've learned to let people be who they are. And I never used to let people be who they were. If somebody was showing me that they were not a good person, there was a part of me that would want to believe that they were a good person. So I would be like, oh no, I used to have someone that I knew who would tell me that they were evil. I'm evil, I'm evil. And I got tired of hearing that. And I'm like, no, you're such a good person. You're so kind and you're so generous and this and this and this. And finally, I realized, and I said this to them at one point, the next time they said they were evil, I said, I have no right to tell you who you are. I see you a certain way, but you're telling me who you are. And if you believe you're evil, then I'm just going to have to take you at your word because I'm not trying to change you or change your narrative. And they never said it again after that, but I didn't do it so much for their benefit, but for mine. Stop telling people who they are, accept people for who they are, and listen when they tell you and observe it when they show you, because there will be people that come into your life that are not going to be good for you. And you've got to be willing to see that and go, no, I think we're not going to go down this path. I'm letting that person go. I'm not going to get involved. Those are the red flags I was talking about earlier, that people will always show you who they are. Your job is to not deny and not recreate their narrative, just to protect yourself. Believe who they're telling you that you are. So that's where a lot of my joy comes from, is just letting people be who they are. And I actually like myself better now, probably the best ever than I ever have, which is weird because I say it's weird because, 30, 40 years ago, my happiness came from hitting a particular number when I weighed myself on the scale, or, from achieving certain goals, or landing this guy that I had been after. That's the kind of stuff that used to make me happy. Now my happiness comes just from living life on life's terms, accepting a lot of what comes into my life, and not so much trying to change the circumstances, but asking myself, what can I do? There's a lot of things I can't control, but what can I control? And there are always things you can do. So I try to keep that hope. It's about not letting go of the hope. There's always hope. And I still try to see the best in people. Yeah, I still try to give people the benefit of the doubt, but if I don't think they're good for me, I'll let them go, move forward, and I don't feel guilty about it. So, yeah, I think I'm in a really good place right now. I'm in a good relationship, a good marriage. Um, Not going to say it's been perfect. We've had our issues just like anybody else. The difference is how they are handled. There's no yelling and screaming and name calling or hitting. It's done in a respectful, calm, peaceful, you know, uh, modulated voice, and it's all about respect and realizing we are both entitled to our opinions. Sometimes we have to agree to disagree,
Mhm.
and that's a thing that people just have to do, I think. So that's where I'm at right now, and it feels pretty good.
I love it. I love it. You talked on a lot of wonderful growth. And I see it. I see it looking at you. I feel your energy through the screen. And when we learn to love ourselves, respect ourselves, um, we definitely have grown into who we're meant to be.
Mhm.
Um, and I see your happiness. I love our conversation, even though we are talking about some dark, ugly stuff, but we are
Yeah.
talking about it from the perspective of the other side, from the
Yes, that's
perspective
exactly.
of the growth, not
Yes.
the focus on the negative,
Yes.
from the growth and who we've become. So, where can people connect with you? I have quite a bit listed on the show notes, which are going to be in there. I'm going to add a couple more because I didn't have the toolbox. And I
Okay.
just add free resources as a link.
Okay.
Will that get people to that safety checklist you talked about, or is that going to be
Um, let's see. Well, the safety checklist is literally if you type in safety.dianemetcalf.com, it will get you to that page.
I will
Um,
definitely add that.
but on the toolbox, there is a tab for free resources, and there's a bunch of things listed there. And then if you do sign up to get my twice a month newsletter, there's always offers and links in there too for all the different things that you know would help. So,
Wonderful.
but where else can people get a hold of me? I freely give my email address. It's Diane@DianeMetcalf.com. And if you really want a one-on-one kind of a conversation, that's probably the best place. But on Facebook, it's at Toxic Undo. So that's my space at Facebook. So it's at TOXICUNDO, no hyphens. And also on Instagram, same thing at Toxic Undo. But you know, you can DM me or email me if you want to do this privately. I don't do coaching, at least not yet, but I consider myself a mentor and a consultant, and that's where I'm at right now. I'm thinking about maybe developing some courses. I'm not sure. I'm just kind of playing around with the possibilities. There's a lot of ideas, but not enough time. You know what I mean? So
I sure
maybe as
do.
far as maybe as far as the coaching goes, I can bounce some ideas off you because you are a coach. And I don't know what that looks like for me, so we might talk some more about that.
That'd be great. Diane,
Okay.
thank you so much for showing up with such honesty and wisdom and heart.
Thank you.
Your courage to turn your story into a source of healing for others is deeply inspiring. For anyone who is listening, who is navigating the aftermath of a toxic relationship, please know you are not alone. You are not broken. And healing is not only possible, but it is your birthright.
Mm.
Be sure to check out Diane's books and blogs at dianemetcalf.com. Don't forget to explore the toolbox. All of that information will be in the show notes. As always, thank you for listening to Happiness on Tap, where we remind you that joy is refillable, healing is possible, and your story matters. Until next time, take care of your beautiful self. Diane, thank you so much.
Thank you, Leanne.